I'm Paul Edwards. I'm a self-published horror author, and first and foremost, a monster kid. Today I'm reading Mad Monsters Magazine, issue number 7, from 1964. I thought some of you might like to look through this magazine with me page by page, just in case you don't own your own copy of Mad Monsters Magazine, issue number 7, from 1964. And together, we can see what kind of vintage monster goodness is in here. Mad Monsters Magazine, issue number 7, is ready for us. Notice the 35-cent cover price. In this issue, we get I Married a Monster from Outer Space. That's what this is from. Corridors of Blood is a Karloff film. And King Kong versus Godzilla. That would have been a big draw for monster kids. And this magazine came out in 1964, so King Kong versus Godzilla had only come out the previous year. Let's be a little careful here. We're going to do it this way. Okay. The Cult of Horror charter member. Wow. Nice. Okay. All right, so in this issue, we get King Kong versus Godzilla. We get The Gentleman of Horror. And we get I Married a Monster from Outer Space. Horrorwood TV. That's a borrowed Forrest J. Ackerman pun. That's from the Rival magazine, Famous Monsters of Filmland. Corridors of Blood and The Deadly Mantis. This is from I Married a Monster from Outer Space. Nice. Okay, so King Kong versus Godzilla was a huge deal to the original wave of monster kids, the kids who were children in the 1960s when this movie was out in the theaters. And it was very well publicized and went over big with kids. And kids were rooting for who they thought would win, King Kong or Godzilla. I'm sure there were a lot of arguments among monster kids on that. And they give you a rundown of the plot. I noticed that right away they're starting with the inserted American scene. This sort of slowed the narrative down. You know, this was not in the Japanese film at all. This was inserted in the American version. These news segments interspersed through the movie. And when they did the Japanese version of King Kong versus Godzilla, the submarine scenes were also broken up and interspersed through the movie. And when they re-edited this movie to be released in the United States, they put all the submarine sequences together, which makes it move along a lot faster. I don't know about you, but I had this book when I was a kid. And every time I saw this movie, I'm like, hey, I have that book. That's a kid's book. What's the guy being an expert on television looking at a kid's book of dinosaurs? All right. Meanwhile, we're going to Kong's Island. There's Kong battling the giant octopus. This giant octopus, although it is not set on screen, it actually has a name, Udaka. There's some monster trivia for you. This is when they had Kong sedated and were binding him up and sending him off to go fight Godzilla. You know, any kid reading this is going to be saying, why are they showing us the human actors? We just want to see the monsters. That's pretty good, though. Kong tearing apart the train. This is not so great. Looking too close at the Kong face is never a good idea in the Japanese Kongs. They should have instead printed a big version of this. That would have been better. Okay. Nice. If you pay really close attention during this movie, the general's name in the English dub changes. Most of the time he's General Shinzo, but at one point they call him General Kenzo. Can you tell I've seen this movie more than once? Yeah. Here's the UN news segment slowing everything down again. The world's mightiest battle. When the movie came out, it was billed as the battle of the century. And there were a lot of these publicity images. In case you can't tell, these are manipulated photos. This isn't an actual still from the movie. This is from the movie, and this is from the movie, but those are cut out and put into a photograph together. And they did that over and over. This is a very well circulated version of that. And this one here, if you're any kind of a monster kid at all, you can probably see the problem. That's not the King Kong from this movie. That's the King Kong from the original 1933 American King Kong, the RKO movie. So that's not even from the movie that they're talking about. But you know what? If you were a kid in 1964, you would take what you could get in terms of monster pictures. Plus, there are some better ones here. So let's see. I love the miniature of the castle that Kong and Godzilla take down. This is like a lot of these in Japanese monster movies. It's a model of a real building in Japan, and that's sort of lost on non-Japanese audiences. But part of the fun of a Godzilla movie to the Japanese is to see real buildings that they know of being destroyed by the monsters. And this castle was a good example of that. Yeah. See, this is one of those pictures that they put together, sort of like Photoshop, although they didn't have Photoshop then, but the same idea. And of course, the greatest scene ever in any motion picture, King Kong has had enough of Godzilla's radioactive fire breath, so he pries out a tree by the roots and stuffs it into Godzilla's throat. And then, of course, if you've seen this movie, you know how the tide of battle is turned. And here you can see the electric current coming out of Kong's hands. Letters to the Mad Monster editor. One kid wrote a little poem called The Werewolf. For all of these things, instead of lingering the camera on them, I hold the camera on long enough so that if you want to read a particular piece, you can just pause the video and read it. Okay, The Gentlemen of Horror. There's a few people that could have gone for that title. I would think of Peter Cushing. But no, it's Lionel Atwill. Lionel Atwill is the Gentleman of Horror. A very distinguished monster. Well, here he is in his role from Man-Made Monster. But he played mad scientist in a ton of movies. A ton. He had a certain classiness about him that made him credible as an intellectual. So that made him appropriate for mad scientist roles. Here's Lionel Atwill as Inspector Krogh in Son of Frankenstein. Here he is in The Mad Doctor of Market Street, which, despite the name, mostly takes place on an island in the South Seas. And then, of course, in Ghost of Frankenstein, He was the manipulative Dr. Bomar, the one who thwarted Dr. Frankenstein's good idea to take the brain of a good man and transplant that into the Frankenstein monster. But Dr. Bomar made a crooked deal with Igor to transplant Igor's brain into the monster. And then here he is again as another police captain in House of Dracula. And you may think, wait a minute, is he the same inspector? But no, because Inspector Crow had an artificial arm, and his character in House of Dracula did not. This guy always creeps me out. If you've seen the movie, you'll know his voice. Very slow and creepy. Ghoul Giggles. Okay, now this one is kind of funny. This is from Curse of the Faceless Man. Boy, did I get plastered last night. Come on, that's funny. Come on. You had to tell him your father could lick his father, you little... Yeah, some of these are not great. Okay. An early pick of the great Bela Lugosi in Murders in the Rue Morgue. I married a monster from outer space. Well, that says it all, doesn't it? If you married a monster from outer space, let me know in the comments. Yeah, that's Gloria Talbot. Gloria Talbot. She's the bride who married the monster from outer space. He has a human form, in case you're wondering how this happened. He has a human form and an alien form. That's a good shot. So, you know, if you were a kid in the 1960s and you wanted monster pictures, a great source of them, and maybe your only source, was a magazine like this. And if they printed a full-page monster picture like this, well, you might get out your scissors, cut this out, and tape it up on your bedroom wall. Because how else were you going to get a monster picture? You couldn't print them off the internet. But if you had access to pictures like this, you might very well cut them out and hang them up. All right, this is a gag bit. We've seen this before in other issues. This is what happens when you eat when you eat a watermelon whole. Scene is from Giant Pumpkin Man Stalks Again, Bobby Blister and the Barbecue Writhers, Hand of Death, Revenge of Louis the Lip. Okay. This giant monstrosity, and they've spelled monstrosity wrong, about to turn Tokyo into shambles is the terrifying, is it Big Bugaroo, Purple People Eater, that was a novelty song, Mothra, or the Seven-Winged What's-It. Even if you didn't know the answers, you could just guess them because every other answer they gave you is a joke answer. Corridors of Blood, one of many, many, many spooky crime movies that Boris Karloff did. In this, he was a doctor who was reluctantly dragged into life in the criminal underworld. This is one of these movies that's primarily a crime movie, but has a lot of elements of horror to it. Like Black Friday. Black Friday is a good example of that. This guy is Resurrection Joe. If you ever heard the Rob Zombie song, The Ballad of Resurrection Joe, that's Resurrection Joe from Corridors of Blood. Now you know. Coffin Capers is the same gag again. A picture from a monster movie with a joke caption. Who made that last martini? Where's my bubble bath? When I operate, I don't monkey around. First, I will remove his belt and hat. Okay. Because he's the monkey scene. Okay. All right. Okay, The Deadly Mantis came out in 1957, the year of the giant bug movies. And this magazine was 1964, so this is 7 years old at this point. Look, terror, horror, screaming suspense. Wow. Oh my gosh. Of course, the Deadly Mantis is much, much, much bigger than it is in this picture. This is just a publicity picture. As far as giant bug movies go, The Deadly Mantis is a pretty good one. I'll always think of this actor, though, as Paul Drake from Perry Mason. Yep, they're showing you the relative size of the mantis. There, there's a nice close-up of the Deadly Mantis. Here comes the military to get rid of him, of course. Yeah. One problem with these magazines is that they never printed spoiler warnings. So if you hadn't yet seen the movie, you know, this article is telling you that the monster is going to die, where the monster is going to die. You can tell it's in a traffic tunnel, and how the monster is going to die, that the military comes and gets it. Did you ever notice that American giant monsters are easily killed by the military, and Japanese giant monsters can never be killed by the military? Interesting. Just a thought, but could it be a difference in how the two cultures see things? That maybe Americans think that there's no problem that the military can't solve? Just a thought. Day the world ended. All right, now we're coming to the best part of any monster magazine, the crazy ads. Monster nails for, you can get all 10 for only 50 cents. Monster Mailman mask specials. Well, some of these are fine. Spasm, horror, but then some of these are not fine. For example, Chinaman. Really? Really? Caveman, split head, gorilla, yeah. Oh boy. Then here are the deluxe masks, over the top. Or you can get a bald wig. You get all kinds of joke shop type gimmicks and tricks here. Disappearing ink, a joy buzzer. Oh my gosh. The Fu Wong Chinese disguise. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's not so good, is it? Here you can get a whole disguise kit, though. You can get the finger chop trick. Nice. Rubber snakes, of course. What kid didn't have a rubber snake? There's the chattering teeth. And here's the shark tooth necklace. The Frankenstein monster mask. Here, they're actually showing you a picture of what you're getting for the mask. Notice in the other ads, they just had a drawing of the mask. Look, you can get the novel, The Running Man, pre-Arnold Schwarzenegger. Nice. Get your horror vinyl albums. I don't know. Should I get the Terror album or the Fright album? Both sound pretty good. Oh, well, this is classic Tales of Terror. Oh, and this is Tales of Horror. Not sure what the difference is. Okay. Get some monster t-shirts. I never liked these super deformed figure images with the huge heads. Some people love them though. Oh, now you're talking. Do-it-yourself werewolf kit. Everything you need to turn yourself into a savage, snarling werewolf. Only $1. Wow. How could you say no? Here's what you get. The Werewolf Curse. Secret step-by-step instructions for changing a human being into a werewolf. Werewolf calendar for 1964. Of course, remember, this is already a 1964 magazine. So why isn't it the Werewolf calendar for 1965? Origin and History of Werewolves. A learned treatise on the subject of lycanthropy. Werewolf Fangs. Ugly and toothsome. For those who have trouble growing their own. Wow. For only $1, do-it-yourself werewolf kit. That sounds like a bargain. Iron-ons to go on your t-shirts. Oh, usually you don't see too many of these in the Lon Chaney Sr. Phantom of the Opera style. Okay, so remember what I said about limited access to monster pictures? Well, here, you could send away for a set of 8x10 glossies, which today, if you wanted them, you could just print them off your computer. But still, you could get 6 of them for $1 back in the 60s. That was pretty good. And they're pretty good shots. You get a good menagerie of monsters. Or you can get this variety pack of monsters, or you can get 6 that are just werewolves. Oh, and they have the Oliver Reed Curse of the Werewolf one in there. And of course, Lon Chaney Jr. is the Wolfman. Here's the Werewolf of London. Or you can get 6 vampire pictures, most of which are Dracula, but not all. You get 2 of Bela Lugosi as Dracula. You get Christopher Lee as Dracula. You get David Peel was not Dracula. He was a vampire. That's from the movie Brides of Dracula. But he was not Count Dracula in that. But for only $1, hey, even if you only wanted a couple of the pictures, that'd be worth it. And now you can get back issues of Mad Monsters or the sister publication, Horror Monsters. I have a couple of issues of Horror Monsters. I should do a video on one of those. All right, and this has been Mad Monsters issue number 7 from 1964. Listen, if you are a fan of classic monsters and vintage horror, you would love my book series, the Mourner's Woods books. I sell them on Amazon.com. I sell them dirt cheap as Amazon will let me. That means 99 cents for an ebook. They're also available in paperback and in audiobook. I got different monsters in different books. I've got a completely different cast of characters in each book so that you will not know who's going to live or die from one book to the next. And I try very hard to keep the tone and vibe of vintage 20th century monster entertainment, but set in a contemporary setting. So check out my book series. My name again is Paul Edwards. My books are the Mourner's Woods books. Listen, thanks for spending time going through this issue of Mad Monsters with me. It was a lot of fun. And I'll see you in Mourner's Woods.